Imagine waking up one morning to discover that hundreds, maybe thousands, of products you personally curated and promoted have been returned. Not just a few, not just a minor hiccup, but a tidal wave of rejection crashing down in front of you. How would it feel? Shocked? Furious? Heartbroken? This is exactly the nightmare scenario that Meghan Markle is facing right now with her lifestyle brand. As ever, what was meant to be a glamorous venture, a reflection of her taste, her aesthetic, and her connection to fans through her Netflix series, With Love, Meghan, has suddenly turned into a logistical, emotional, and public relations nightmare. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the outside, As Ever looked perfect. Jars of homemade style jams, pots of artisanal honey, fragrant teas, and delicate crepe mixes lined shelves, promising a slice of Meghan's curated life. It was supposed to feel intimate, inviting, and luxurious. People imagined themselves stirring a pot of her strawberry preserves while reminiscing about that charming episode of With Love, Meghan. The marketing was flawless. The visuals were stunning. The social media posts were everywhere. Yet, behind the glittering exterior, trouble was quietly building. Let's be honest, celebrity brands have always walked a fine line. On the one hand, they bring instant credibility, media attention, and massive reach. On the other hand, the public holds every item to an impossible standard. Every product is scrutinized, every price point is criticized, and every little imperfection becomes a headline. For Meghan, this was more than just a business venture. It was an extension of her public identity. Every return jar, every dissatisfied customer, cut deeper than it would for a typical entrepreneur. This is a brand that carried her name, her style, and her reputation. And the returns? They weren't just numbers. They were blows to her personal brand. From the first batch of complaints, there were subtle warning signs. Small murmurs on social media, minor dissatisfaction expressed in online reviews, and occasional shipping issues were all early signals. But Meghan's team, buoyed by early hype and seemingly glowing sales numbers, brushed them aside. After all, who could have predicted that a brand tied to a global television star could face such intense scrutiny? Yet, as the days passed, what started as a trickle became an undeniable flood. Products came back to warehouses at astonishing rates, each return amplifying the public perception that As Ever wasn't living up to its promise. Now, you might be wondering, why did people return these products in such large numbers? Was it the taste? The texture? The price? The packaging? Or was there something else entirely? A deeper disconnect between Meghan's curated world and the expectations of real consumers? To fully understand, we need to examine not just the products themselves, but the context in which they were launched. With Love, Meghan presented a lifestyle fantasy, a warm, intimate, artisanal world where every dish, every ingredient, and every sip seemed effortless. But reality, as it often does, is far more complicated. Reality involves logistics, mass production, and the stark truth that what works on a television screen doesn't always translate to a consumer product. And when the product falls short, the backlash can be immediate and brutal. Let's also not underestimate the role of social media in this story. In today's world, a single negative post can snowball into a viral storm. One dissatisfied customer tweeting, posting, or TikToking about a broken jar of jam or a tea that didn't taste like it should can trigger thousands of responses within hours. Social media amplifies everything, the good, the bad, and the catastrophic. Meghan's team found themselves not just handling returns. They were navigating a public relations crisis unfolding in real time, where every comment, every meme, every shared video fueled the narrative that As Ever was faltering. And when your name is attached to it, the stakes aren't just financial, they're personal. Beyond the numbers and the social media uproar lies the emotional story. Meghan, like any founder, poured her creativity, her personality, and her vision into this brand. It wasn't just about selling products. It was about creating a lifestyle, a connection, a sense of intimacy with her audience. Every jar of jam, every box of tea, was meant to convey a piece of her story. So imagine seeing all of that returned, unopened, or discarded. Imagine the frustration of knowing that something you believed in, something you put your name on, wasn't being received as intended. The human side of this story is as compelling as the numbers themselves. It's a story of ambition colliding with reality, of perception clashing with expectation, and of a public figure confronting criticism on an unprecedented scale. And it doesn't stop there. The returns aren't merely a reflection of consumer taste. They are intertwined with a complex web of supply chain issues, logistical failures, and the immense pressure of celebrity branding. For instance, consider the way these products were packaged, shipped, and marketed. A minor flaw in labeling, a delayed shipment, or an unexpected texture could escalate into a wave of complaints and returns. Each misstep is magnified when the brand bears the public's gaze and the scrutiny of millions. And Meghan? She's caught in the eye of this storm. She must manage the narrative, protect her public image, and contend with the very real financial and emotional fallout, all while under intense media scrutiny. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this saga isn't just the returns themselves. It's the cultural lens through which they are being interpreted. Meghan Markle, a figure who has long been both celebrated and criticized, now faces judgment not only for her personal life, but for her professional endeavors. Every product return is dissected, every criticism amplified, every perceived failure turned into a story. It's a stark reminder that celebrity brands exist at the intersection of commerce and culture, where public opinion can shape the trajectory of a company as powerfully as any marketing campaign. And here's where it gets even more dramatic. While many would expect Meghan to respond with calm professionalism, insiders suggest that her reaction has been anything but muted. Reports hint at frustration, disbelief, and perhaps even anger at the unfolding situation. After all, for someone whose public persona is meticulously curated, the stark reality of thousands of returned products isn't just a business problem, it's a personal affront. And yet, amidst this tension, there's an opportunity, a chance to pivot, to innovate, to reclaim control of the narrative. The question is whether Meghan and her team can rise to that challenge, or whether the wave of backlash will prove too powerful to counter. As we dive deeper into this story, we'll explore the origins of, as ever, the meteoric rise of the brand, the early signs of trouble, and the cascading series of events that led to the current crisis. We'll hear from insiders, analyze public reactions, dissect supply chain issues, and examine how celebrity culture magnifies even the smallest missteps. We'll also delve into the emotional and psychological toll on Meghan herself. What it means to see your name, your brand, and your vision subjected to such intense scrutiny. And along the way, we'll uncover the shocking twists that nobody saw coming, the contradictions that make this story so compelling, and the cliffhangers that leave everyone asking, what happens next? Because make no mistake, this isn't just a story about returned jams and teas. It's a story about ambition, image, expectation, and reality colliding in the harsh light of public attention. It's about a brand, yes, but more importantly, it's about a woman navigating one of the most scrutinized positions in modern celebrity culture. And as the returns pile up, as the headlines grow louder, and as the public debates her every move, the question lingers. Will Liz ever survive this storm? And at what cost to Meghan herself? What drives someone to create a brand that carries their name? For Meghan Markle, the answer seemed simple at first. Passion, creativity, and a desire to share a piece of her world with others. But as we soon learn, passion can collide violently with expectation, and creativity, no matter how refined, does not always translate to commercial success. As Ever was born out of a vision of warmth, intimacy, and personal touch. A lifestyle brand designed to feel approachable yet luxurious, it promised more than products. It promised an experience. But as with any ambitious project, the path from vision to reality was fraught with challenges, and early signs of trouble were already lurking beneath the glossy surface. It all started during the filming of With Love, Meghan, her Netflix series that captured millions of viewers worldwide. The show wasn't just a cooking series. It was a carefully curated narrative of domestic charm, cozy kitchens, and artisanal indulgence. Viewers fell in love with Meghan's persona. Graceful, approachable, stylish, yet relatable. It was the perfect backdrop to launch a lifestyle brand. The connection was obvious. if fans were already watching Meghan make her signature crepes or taste her jams on camera, why wouldn't they want a piece of that experience for themselves? The early planning sessions for As Ever reportedly involved long hours, multiple tastings, and careful curation of every product. Meghan wanted each item to feel personal. Every jar of jam, every box of tea, every package of crepe mix was to be a reflection of her taste. But it wasn't just about flavor. It was about image, identity, and perception. The packaging had to convey elegance. The ingredients had to feel artisanal. And the brand name, As Ever, was meant to suggest timelessness, continuity, and a personal touch that would resonate with consumers. In theory, it was a perfect alignment of celebrity influence and product design. Yet, behind this seemingly smooth process, tensions were quietly building. Launching a brand in the public eye is never simple, and when the founder is also one of the most scrutinized women in the world, every decision becomes a potential headline. Sourcing ingredients for artisanal jams meant relying on small-scale suppliers who could deliver high-quality products but were not used to the pressures of mass production. Packaging design had to be visually stunning yet functional. A balance that sounds simple until you see the reality of shipping, labeling, and shelf placement. And then there was the marketing strategy. How do you make a lifestyle brand feel personal when it is simultaneously mass-produced and globally distributed? Some insiders suggest that even in the earliest days, there were signs that As Ever might not scale as seamlessly as anticipated. Focus groups hinted at price sensitivity, potential taste discrepancies, and consumer confusion over what the brand represented. Yet these early warnings were overshadowed by the enthusiasm surrounding Meghan's name, the Netflix tie-in, and the sheer media buzz. After all, when the launch date was set, anticipation was astronomical. Fans were ready. Retailers were ready. And Meghan herself, confident in her vision, pushed forward with conviction. The initial rollout of As Ever was carefully orchestrated. Social media teasers, influencer partnerships, and visually stunning launch events created a sense of exclusivity. The message was clear. This wasn't just a product line. It was a lifestyle. A glimpse into the curated world of Meghan Markle, now available for the public to purchase and experience at home. Every detail mattered. The colors of the labels, the texture of the crepe mix, the type of jars used for jams. All meticulously considered. And for a brief moment, everything seemed to align. But perfection, as we know, is rarely achieved in the real world. Within weeks of the launch, subtle cracks began to appear. Shipping delays emerged due to unforeseen demand spikes. Some early customers complained about minor inconsistencies in product quality, and rumors of supply chain mismanagement began circulating quietly. What was initially seen as minor, fixable issues would soon spiral into something much larger. The human side of the story is just as compelling. Meghan reportedly poured herself into every detail of As Ever, reviewing samples personally, approving packaging designs, and consulting on marketing materials. Her involvement was intense, bordering on obsessive, as she sought to ensure that the brand truly reflected her vision. But with such a high personal investment comes vulnerability. The public doesn't just judge the product, they judge the person behind it. And when the first wave of complaints began, it wasn't just jars being returned. It was her reputation, her taste, and her judgment under scrutiny. There's also the contradiction at the heart of celebrity brands. On one hand, Meghan's name guaranteed immediate attention, media coverage, and a built-in audience. On the other hand, the same fame magnified every imperfection. A minor production delay that would go unnoticed for a typical brand became front-page news. A customer tweeting about a broken jar of jam was instantly amplified across multiple platforms. Social media, with all its speed and reach, became both ally and adversary. What was meant to be a celebration of her creativity slowly began to feel like a trial by public opinion. Yet, despite the warning signs, the vision of As Ever remained compelling. Meghan's goal wasn't just to sell products. It was to tell a story. Every tea bag, every jar of honey, every package of crepe mix was meant to invite customers into her carefully curated lifestyle. And this narrative was essential because behind the products lay a larger ambition to expand beyond the brand itself. Meghan's name had become synonymous with a certain lifestyle aspiration, and as ever was intended to capitalize on that association, creating a multi-platform empire of products, experiences, and media extensions. But ambitious visions often collide with reality. The very qualities that made as ever special, attention to detail, artisanal charm, and a celebrity-driven personal touch, also made it fragile. The scaling process exposed vulnerabilities in logistics, marketing, and customer expectations. Small inconsistencies, minor complaints, or delays could quickly escalate into crises magnified by media coverage and public scrutiny. The tension between vision and execution was always present, waiting for the right, or wrong, moment to surface. And that moment came sooner than anyone could have anticipated. The first wave of returns arrived almost imperceptibly at first, customers sending back a jar here, a box there. But as days passed, the returns multiplied, and what was initially seen as isolated incidents quickly turned into a pattern that could no longer be ignored. The dream of as ever, carefully nurtured, meticulously curated, and personally overseen, was colliding with an unforgiving reality. At the heart of this story lies a question that everyone watching, reading, or listening is asking. Why did this happen? Was it poor planning, bad luck, consumer misunderstanding, or simply the impossible pressures of managing a celebrity brand? The answer is complicated, layered, and as dramatic as the brand's rise itself. To understand, we must examine not just the products or the logistics, but the human, cultural, and emotional context in which as ever was launched. Every decision, every oversight, and every challenge contributed to the unfolding saga of returns, complaints, and public backlash. So here we are, at the very beginning of what would become one of the most dramatic celebrity brand stories in recent memory. A brand launched with love, vision, and ambition, now facing its first test. Returns, backlash, and an uncertain future. Meghan Markle, once celebrated for her taste, style, and cultural influence, now found herself confronting the harsh reality that even the most carefully curated world can unravel under the weight of public expectation. What happens when anticipation turns into obsession? That's exactly what unfolded in the early days of As Ever. From the moment the brand launched, it wasn't just another celebrity product line, it was a global event. Millions of eyes were on Meghan Markle, watching her every move, analyzing every post, and waiting to see how her vision would translate from screen to store shelf. The hype was electric, the attention overwhelming, and the stakes impossibly high. But as we'll see, massive attention is a double-edged sword. It can make a brand, but it can also break it. The first weeks after launch were nothing short of spectacular. Social media platforms buzzed with excitement. Instagram influencers unboxed jars of strawberry preserves with squeals of delight. TikTok creators filmed themselves trying the teas and crepe mixes, praising their artisanal quality. Twitter was flooded with mentions, retweets, and viral memes about the products. Even mainstream media couldn't resist covering the story. Headlines like Meghan Markle's As Ever brings luxury to your kitchen and celebrity chef meets royalty inside As Ever dominated feeds worldwide. The public was captivated. This kind of hype is intoxicating. For a brand, it feels like validation, proof that your vision resonates, that your idea has struck a chord. But the reality is more complicated. When everyone is watching, every minor flaw becomes amplified. A slightly oversweet jam becomes a viral complaint. A shipping delay turns into a social media storm. The higher the hype, the more fragile the perception of perfection becomes. And for As Ever, that fragile perception would soon be tested in ways no one expected. Part of the early excitement came from the Netflix connection. With Love, Meghan wasn't just a show, it was a cultural moment. Fans had invested emotionally in Meghan's persona, the elegant yet approachable woman sharing her favorite recipes, the warmth of her storytelling, the charm of her domestic expertise. As Ever promised to bring that same experience in homes worldwide. Consumers felt they weren't just buying a product, they were buying a piece of Meghan's lifestyle. The emotional pull was powerful. People wanted to feel connected, to taste what she tasted, to experience what they saw on screen. Yet, there was a subtle tension underlying all the enthusiasm. Some early adopters noted that the branding suggested an artisanal, boutique experience, but the scale of distribution hinted at mass-market production. This contradiction, luxury image versus widespread availability, was largely ignored in the initial excitement, but it planted the seeds of skepticism. People were thrilled to be part of the narrative, but the expectations they carried were high. And high expectations, as anyone who's launched a product knows, are difficult to meet consistently. Retailers, too, were caught up in the frenzy. Stores rushed to stock as ever products, hoping to capitalize on the surge of interest. Shelves filled quickly, and for a brief moment, it seemed as if the brand had achieved the perfect alignment of celebrity influence, media buzz, and consumer desire. Early sales numbers were impressive, reinforcing the narrative that this was a resounding success. But behind the scenes, logistics were already under strain. Warehouses struggled to keep up with demand, and distribution channels were stretched thin. Small issues, like mislabeled jars or delayed shipments, began to surface. In isolation, these might have been minor hiccups, but in the context of massive attention, even small mistakes would be magnified. And then came social media's double-edged influence. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok were initially allies, spreading awareness and excitement. But they also became a magnifying glass for criticism. A single dissatisfied customer could post a video of a broken jar or a disappointing taste test, and within hours, that video could reach thousands, if not millions. Viral posts often included hashtags like #AsEverFail or #NotWorthIt, turning minor complaints into public spectacles. The very channels that amplified excitement also amplified criticism, creating a precarious balance for the brand. What's remarkable about this period is the emotional roller coaster it created, not just for the brand team, but for Meghan herself. She had invested so much personally in every detail: the packaging, the recipes, the marketing strategy. Seeing the initial praise must have been exhilarating, but simultaneously, she was under constant scrutiny. Every positive review was counterbalanced by a critical comment. Every influencer endorsement came with an audience ready to critique. In that environment, it's easy to understand how the initial thrill of hype could begin to feel like pressure and even anxiety. There's also the cultural factor at play. Meghan Markle is not just a celebrity. She is a global figure subject to intense public judgment. That judgment doesn't pause for product launches. Every product she releases is interpreted not just as a culinary or lifestyle choice, but as a statement about her taste, her values, and her personal brand. That adds an extra layer of tension that most new brands never face. For most entrepreneurs, mistakes are contained, addressed quietly, and moved past. For Meghan, even minor missteps were exposed to the glare of public scrutiny. In the early hype, there were also moments of contradiction. Fans celebrated the perceived intimacy of the products, but some critics questioned whether they truly reflected Meghan's lifestyle or were simply a marketing construct. Influencers praised the aesthetic, yet others noted inconsistencies between the promises of artisanal quality and the reality of mass production. These contradictions didn't dominate headlines at first, but they created an undercurrent that would later fuel larger backlash. Even within her own team, there were reports of tension. Staff working behind the scenes reportedly felt the pressure of meeting impossible deadlines while maintaining the standards Meghan demanded. Some insiders mentioned heated discussions over packaging choices, product testing, and quality control. The combination of high stakes, personal investment, and public attention created an environment where stress and emotion were inevitable. And as if the pressure wasn't enough, the media began picking up on early returns and minor complaints. Entertainment news outlets, lifestyle blogs, and gossip columns started covering the story with a mix of fascination and critique. Headlines framed as ever not just as a lifestyle brand, but as a test of Meghan's ability to navigate commercial ventures under the harshest spotlight imaginable. The narrative was no longer about products. It was about Meghan's judgment, her taste, and her ability to manage success. The culmination of all this early hype, praise, scrutiny, and media attention set the stage for what would come next. The brand was riding a wave of visibility that could have propelled it to long-term success, or it could have accelerated its descent. Every consumer interaction, every viral post, every product return would now carry amplified consequences. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation between public expectation and reality. A confrontation that would test the limits of Meghan's brand, her vision, and her personal resilience. And yet, despite all the warnings and the contradictions, few people were prepared for the sheer scale of the first wave of returns. The early hype had masked underlying issues, creating a sense of invincibility. But reality has a way of humbling even the most celebrated ventures. The initial excitement, the social media praise, the influencer buzz, all of it would soon collide with a growing tide of consumer dissatisfaction. It started quietly. One jar here, one box there. A tweet from a disappointed customer. A short review on an online retailer. At first, it didn't seem like a crisis. Just the small hiccups any new product faces. But sometimes, small things are the first cracks in what appears to be a perfect facade. For Meghan Markle's as ever, those cracks quickly widened into a chasm. Imagine the feeling. Months of preparation, meticulous planning, personal investment, and suddenly, the products that were meant to charm and delight were coming back in alarming numbers. Warehouses received returns by the dozens, then the hundreds. Social media amplified every complaint. Every broken jar, every product that didn't taste like expected became a story shared, liked, and reposted thousands of times. The initial wave of hype gave way to something far more unforgiving: public scrutiny. Why were products being returned? Some customers cited taste issues. Perhaps the jam was too sweet, or the tea lacked the flavor they anticipated. Others complained about packaging mishaps, jars that leaked, labels that smudged, boxes that arrived damaged. A small number mentioned shipping delays, feeling misled by promises of quick delivery. And then there were more subjective complaints, like, doesn't feel luxurious enough, or, not what I expected from Meghan Markle. Each of these seemed minor in isolation, but collectively, they formed a perfect storm. The speed at which returns escalated shocked everyone. Within days, what had started as isolated incidents turned into a flood. Retailers reported shelves emptying as they scrambled to manage both demand and the growing wave of returns. Insiders described chaotic scenes at warehouses, with stacks of jars, boxes of tea, and bags of crepe mix piling up faster than anyone could process them. The numbers were staggering. Thousands of products in circulation suddenly made their way back into storage, creating logistical nightmares and financial strain. And while numbers tell one part of the story, the emotional toll on Meghan and her team told another. For a founder, every return product is more than a line item. It's a judgment, a reflection of your decisions, your taste, your brand's promise. Reports suggested that Meghan was stunned by the scale of the returns. Staffers described tense meetings, emails flying back and forth, and discussions filled with disbelief. How could something so carefully crafted, so thoughtfully marketed, receive such widespread rejection? Then came the social media storm. Platforms that had previously amplified excitement now magnified complaints. Videos of dissatisfied customers went viral, some humorous, some scathing, all damaging. Influencers who had initially praised the products now faced criticism themselves for endorsing items that didn't meet expectations. Hashtags like #AsEverFail began trending, drawing attention from people who hadn't even purchased the products. For a celebrity brand, the reach of these complaints was enormous. Each viral post carried the potential to influence thousands more potential buyers, creating a feedback loop of skepticism and dissatisfaction. Part of the problem, insiders say, was expectation versus reality. Fans bought into the fantasy portrayed on Netflix. Warm kitchens, artisanal charm, and a touch of Meghan's personal magic. But mass-produced products, even with careful oversight, cannot always capture that same intimacy. When the jam on a store shelf didn't taste exactly like it had on screen, disappointment was inevitable. And disappointment, as we know, travels fast, especially on social media. Some of the earliest returns were minor. A few jars with broken lids, a tea bag missing from a box, or a slightly damaged label. Yet these small issues quickly multiplied. Every customer who shared their frustration online inspired others to check their purchases, examine their experiences, and sometimes return products themselves. What started as a trickle became a torrent. The logistics of handling these returns added another layer of complication. Warehouses weren't prepared for the sheer volume, and customer service teams were overwhelmed. Emails, phone calls, and complaints poured in faster than anyone could respond. And then came the financial impact. Returns mean more than just lost sales. They include shipping costs, restocking fees, potential spoilage of perishable items, and the cost of addressing dissatisfied customers. For as ever, the financial burden escalated quickly. Reports suggest that early projections of profit margins were far off, as the volume of returns ate into revenue. It wasn't just disappointing. It was alarming. For a high-profile brand like As Ever, financial stress carried the added danger of public perception. If the returns became widely known, they could tarnish the brand's image before it had a chance to fully establish itself. There was also a psychological dimension at play. Meghan, who had invested personal energy into curating each product, reportedly felt a profound sense of shock and frustration. Imagine crafting every detail with care, overseeing flavor profiles, packaging, marketing, and customer experience, only to see the public response so sharply critical. Staff described her as stunned, disbelief mixed with a hint of personal hurt. It's not easy to separate the brand from yourself when your name is literally on the label. Every return jar wasn't just a product. It felt like a reflection of her judgment. Insiders also suggest that the early wave of returns created tension among the team. Debates over quality control, marketing strategies, and distribution decisions became heated. Some blamed the supply chain, others blamed unrealistic consumer expectations, and some even questioned the decision to tie the brand so closely to a celebrity persona. The internal discord only magnified the external chaos, creating a pressure cooker environment where mistakes were amplified and emotions ran high. Meanwhile, the media smelled the story. Entertainment news outlets, lifestyle magazines, and gossip blogs began covering the returns, framing them as a dramatic twist in Meghan Markle's entrepreneurial journey. Headlines highlighted the irony. A brand designed to bring warmth, charm, and a touch of personal magic now facing what some called a mass return crisis. The framing was relentless. The narrative shifted from celebration to scrutiny, and every product return became a symbol of a larger perceived failure. What's particularly striking is the speed at which the narrative evolved. The initial returns might have been manageable, but the combination of viral social media posts, influencer commentary, and media coverage accelerated the crisis. Each new piece of coverage reinforced the perception of widespread dissatisfaction, even if many customers were still delighted with their purchases. The public narrative began to outpace reality, and the brand found itself caught in a storm it could not easily control. Yet, despite the chaos, there were those who still believed in the brand. Loyal fans and early adopters defended the products, posting positive reviews and sharing their experiences online. But their voices were often drowned out by the volume of negative commentary, and the perception of failure grew with every returned product. It's a classic challenge of celebrity branding. The louder the fanfare, the louder the backlash can be when things go wrong. By the end of the first week of returns, the numbers were staggering. Warehouses were overwhelmed, social media was ablaze, and the team was scrambling to understand what had gone wrong. Meghan herself reportedly began to feel the weight of the situation personally. The brand she had nurtured, the products she had personally overseen, were now at the center of a public storm. And in the midst of this, a question loomed. How had something that started as a promising venture become a full-blown crisis so quickly? How do you respond when the world seems to turn against you overnight? For Meghan Markle, the wave of returns from her As Ever line wasn't just a business headache. It was deeply personal. Every dissatisfied customer, every viral complaint, and every media headline felt like a judgment on her vision, her taste, and her judgment. Behind the public eye, the scene was tense, emotional, and at times chaotic. Inside the As Ever offices, staffers described a whirlwind of activity as teams scrambled to manage the crisis. Emails flew back and forth at all hours. Calls were made to suppliers to address quality control issues. Warehouses were flooded with returned products, and customer service teams were stretched to their limits trying to respond to complaints. But amid the logistical nightmare, one constant was clear: Meghan's involvement was intense. Far from delegating the crisis entirely, she was in the thick of it, personally reviewing reports, evaluating returns, and strategizing responses. Sources say that Meghan's reaction was a mixture of disbelief, frustration, and determination. It was reportedly difficult for her to separate the criticism from herself. After all, this wasn't just a product line. It was a reflection of her personal taste, her aesthetic, and her vision. Every jar of jam, every tea box, every package of crepe mix carried her name. And when customers expressed dissatisfaction, it didn't just feel like a product failure. It felt like a personal failure. Staff described tense meetings where Meghan questioned every detail, from ingredient sourcing to packaging decisions. She reportedly asked pointed questions about how quality checks had failed, why shipments had been delayed, and how the messaging might have misled consumers. There was a sense of urgency and personal investment that few executives experience. This was more than damage control. It was about protecting a brand that was inseparable from her identity. Yet, even as frustration built, Meghan's team emphasized the importance of strategy. Social media had to be monitored closely. Every viral post had the potential to escalate the situation. The media narrative had to be managed carefully, ensuring that outlets didn't frame the brand as a total failure. Customer service protocols were tightened, with detailed scripts created to address common complaints. Yet despite all these efforts, the emotional weight on Meghan remained. She was reportedly both shocked and hurt by the sheer volume of returns and criticism. Some insiders revealed that the emotional stakes created moments of tension within the team. Staff felt pressure not only to resolve logistical issues, but also to protect Meghan's public image. Heated discussions arose over messaging, social media responses, and public relations strategies. Decisions that might have been routine for a typical brand suddenly became high-stakes debates. Every choice carried both operational and emotional consequences, magnified by the public scrutiny that comes with celebrity entrepreneurship. Beyond the immediate logistical challenges, there were deeper concerns about brand perception. Meghan had envisioned as a bridge between her personal world and her audience, a lifestyle brand that felt intimate, artisanal, and connected to her vision. Yet the early returns suggested a disconnect between expectation and reality. Customers had anticipated perfection, and even small imperfections were amplified by the lens of celebrity scrutiny. For Meghan, reconciling this gap was deeply frustrating. It wasn't just about fixing problems. It was about understanding why her carefully crafted experience hadn't translated perfectly into reality. Media coverage intensified the pressure. Stories began framing the returns as a public rebuke, highlighting the irony of a brand designed to exude warmth and personal charm now facing rejection. Headlines questioned Meghan's business acumen, her taste, and the very concept of celebrity-driven lifestyle products. The intensity of the media attention reportedly added to Meghan's stress, making the situation feel larger, more personal, and more urgent than it might have for an anonymous entrepreneur. At the same time, the human side of this experience was profound. Staffers described moments when Meghan showed visible frustration, pacing the office, reviewing reports late into the night, and expressing disbelief at the sheer scale of returns. Yet there were also moments of reflection, where she reportedly considered the emotional impact of the backlash on her audience, her team, and herself. The process was not just operational, it was deeply personal. Every decision, every response, every strategy carried emotional weight. Social media monitoring became a full-time endeavor. Every viral post, negative review, and trending hashtag was analyzed to understand the emerging narrative. Experts were consulted to help manage public perception, from crisis communication specialists to branding consultants. Yet despite these efforts, the emotional roller coaster continued. Meghan was navigating an unprecedented situation where her personal identity, her public persona, and her business vision were all intertwined. The stakes were extraordinarily high, and the pressure immense. Some insiders noted that the experience brought out contradictions in the brand itself. While As Ever was marketed as personal and intimate, the scale of production and distribution created challenges that made achieving that intimacy difficult. The tension between mass accessibility and personal touch became a recurring theme in internal discussions. Meghan reportedly pushed for creative solutions, trying to maintain a sense of connection with customers even as the brand scaled rapidly. The early returns also had a ripple effect across the team. Staff morale fluctuated as the crisis unfolded. On one hand, the visibility and media attention were unprecedented, offering a sense of excitement. On the other hand, the constant scrutiny and criticism created stress and tension. Meetings often included passionate debates, with some team members advocating for a more conservative response, while others pushed for bold, proactive strategies. Meghan herself reportedly oscillated between frustration, determination, and deep reflection, seeking to balance emotional responses with strategic action. Yet, even with intense involvement, the full scale of the returns was difficult to contain. Social media amplified every minor issue, traditional media picked up on trending topics, and consumer reactions continued to grow in volume and intensity. The situation was evolving hour by hour, leaving little time for Meghan or her team to regroup. And while she worked tirelessly behind the scenes, the narrative outside continued to gain momentum, shaping public perception in ways that were increasingly hard to manage. Through all this, one thing was clear: Meghan was personally invested in turning the situation around. Unlike many celebrity entrepreneurs who delegate nearly all operational decisions, she remained deeply involved, balancing emotional stakes with strategic choices. Her responses, both internal and external, demonstrated a complex mixture of vulnerability, determination, and high-stakes decision-making. Every action she took reflected not just her role as a business leader, but her personal connection to the brand and the expectations tied to her public identity. Yet, despite all efforts, the returns kept coming. The first wave was just the beginning. What had started as isolated incidents had now become a pattern, raising urgent questions about production quality, supply chain management, and brand perception. It wasn't just a business challenge, it was a public, emotional, and cultural test. And as the team scrambled to respond, Meghan had to confront a sobering reality. Even with careful planning, the collision of celebrity, expectation, and reality can create chaos that no one can fully control. Have you ever watched a conversation spiral out of control online? Now imagine millions of people discussing your name, your brand, and your products, all at once. That's exactly what happened when, as Ever's first wave of returns hit social media. Suddenly, every jar of jam, every box of tea, every bag of crepe mix became more than a product. They became symbols in a digital battleground where fans and critics clashed in real time. It began subtly. A tweet here, an Instagram story there. Someone complained that a jar of strawberry preserves didn't taste as good as in the show. Another user posted a TikTok about tea that wasn't as flavorful as expected. In isolation, these posts seemed minor, even forgivable. But social media has a unique way of amplifying small voices into tidal waves. Within hours, these minor grievances were being shared, liked, and reposted thousands of times. Algorithms, designed to reward engagement, magnified the posts even further, creating an echo chamber of scrutiny. The most dramatic aspect of this explosion was the speed. Viral content travels fast, faster than any traditional media outlet can manage. Within a day, hashtags like #AsEverFail, #NotWorthIt, and #RoreJection were trending across multiple platforms. Each new complaint encouraged others to voice their own opinions, sparking debates, memes, and videos. Fans tried to defend the brand, posting glowing reviews and sharing their positive experiences. But the critical voices often drowned out the praise, creating the impression that As Ever was failing on a massive scale, even if the majority of products were perfectly fine. One particularly viral post showed a jar of jam with a broken lid and a spilled label. The creator framed it as a metaphor. This is what happens when you sell perfection in a jar. You can't control reality. The video racked up millions of views. For every positive post defending Meghan and her products, multiple negative posts countered, creating an overwhelming narrative that the brand was struggling. Social media had turned the brand into a public spectacle, and the clash between fans and critics became personal. Loyal followers argued fiercely with detractors. "I've tried As Ever, and it's amazing," one comment read. Another fired back, "You're just blind. This is overpriced and overhyped." The comment sections became battlegrounds, with arguments extending across multiple platforms. What started as product reviews had evolved into cultural debates about celebrity brands, expectations, and authenticity. The story of As Ever was no longer confined to the product. It had become a larger conversation about Meghan Markle herself. Influencers played a critical role in the social media storm. Those who had initially praised the products now faced backlash for their endorsements. Some tried to walk a fine line, posting balanced reviews or emphasizing that taste is subjective. Others leaned into humor, creating memes or satirical videos highlighting perceived flaws. While this generated engagement, it also contributed to the perception that the brand was failing on a larger scale. In the digital age, every endorsement or critique has consequences, especially when tied to a high-profile celebrity. The emotional impact on Meghan was reportedly intense. Insiders say she monitored social media closely, reading posts, watching videos, and tracking hashtags. While some positive feedback uplifted her, the sheer volume of criticism was unavoidable. Reports suggest she experienced frustration, disbelief, and even personal hurt as she watched a wave of negative sentiment unfold in real time. It's one thing to hear about returns and complaints in numbers. It's another to see your name, your work, and your vision dissected publicly by millions. One of the most challenging dynamics was the speed at which perception diverged from reality. Many posts focused on isolated incidents, like a single broken jar or a misprinted label, but the viral nature of these stories made it appear as if problems were universal. Casual observers, scrolling through feeds, often assumed that widespread failure was occurring, even if most products were perfectly fine. Social media had created a distorted mirror, amplifying small imperfections into what seemed like mass dissatisfaction. And it didn't stop there. As the storm grew, news outlets began picking up social media trends, reporting on the crisis at As Ever. Headlines emphasized the irony of a lifestyle brand linked to a celebrity figure now facing widespread criticism. The media coverage reinforced social media narratives, creating a feedback loop. Negative posts generated news stories, which in turn amplified online discussion, which then generated more posts. The situation escalated at a pace that few could manage, and the pressure on Meghan and her team intensified. Fans and critics clashed not just over product quality, but over broader questions. Was As Ever authentic or just a marketing construct? Could a celebrity brand truly reflect personal taste at scale? Did Meghan herself understand the practical realities of producing and distributing artisanal products globally? These debates weren't limited to product reviews. They touched on identity, authenticity, and public perception. In many ways, As Ever had become a symbol, a proxy for larger cultural conversations about celebrity, commerce, and expectation. Interestingly, some of the backlash was fueled by contradiction. Meghan's brand emphasized intimacy, charm, and a personal connection. Yet the very scale of distribution and marketing made achieving that intimacy difficult. Fans expected the warmth of a curated Netflix kitchen in every product. When reality didn't match expectation, disappointment was amplified. Critics seized on this gap between image and reality, using social media as a platform to voice dissatisfaction and frame the brand as inauthentic. The team behind As Ever scrambled to respond. Social media monitoring became a full-time effort. Every viral post, every trending hashtag, every comment thread was tracked and analyzed. PR strategies were revised on the fly. Customer service teams were briefed to respond with empathy, clarity, and prompt solutions. Influencers were coached on how to address questions and feedback. Despite these efforts, the scale of engagement made full control impossible. Social media had taken on a life of its own. There were moments of absurdity too. Memes poking fun at the brand circulated widely. TikTok creators staged elaborate jokes about jars of jam, rejecting their owners. Twitter threads debated whether As Ever crepe mix was too royal for the average kitchen. Humor, as always, served both as entertainment and as amplification, spreading awareness while reinforcing criticism. Every joke, every viral clip, became part of the public conversation about Meghan's brand. For Meghan, the personal stakes were enormous. As Ever wasn't just a business venture. It was tied to her identity, her taste, and her public persona. Each negative post, every viral complaint, felt like a reflection not just on the products, but on her herself. Insiders describe a combination of shock, frustration, and determination in her response. She reportedly worked tirelessly behind the scenes, reviewing strategies, monitoring trends, and personally approving responses to social media posts. The emotional toll was immense, and the sense of urgency palpable. Yet, even as social media stormed, there was a lesson about expectation management. Celebrity brands, by their nature, attract attention far beyond what a typical startup would experience. Every flaw is magnified, every inconsistency scrutinized, every misstep amplified. Social media doesn't just report reality, it shapes perception. And perception, in the digital age, often matters more than facts. But the most surprising twist was yet to come. While social media had amplified criticism, it also became a catalyst for a new layer of drama, one that would escalate the crisis to an unprecedented level. Fans, critics, and even media outlets began uncovering connections, contradictions, and questions that no one could have predicted. The storm was growing, and the next wave of revelation would push the brand, and Meghan herself, into uncharted territory. The moment social media erupted, the media followed. What began as isolated product returns and online complaints rapidly transformed into a full-blown news story. For as ever, the honeymoon phase of coverage, where glowing features and lifestyle profiles dominated, was over. The narrative had shifted, and headlines now focused squarely on criticism, backlash, and controversy. It started with smaller lifestyle publications reporting on the wave of returns. Fans return Meghan Markle's As Ever jams amid quality concerns, read one article. Is As Ever too ambitious for its own good? Asked another. While these pieces were initially cautious in tone, they framed the story as a growing problem, one that suggested deeper issues beyond isolated complaints. Soon, the story escalated. National media outlets picked up the coverage, amplifying the narrative and reaching millions more viewers. The framing was consistent. As Ever, a brand that promised artisanal charm, personal connection, and luxury, was now facing public scrutiny on a massive scale. Journalists highlighted the irony. A lifestyle brand created to feel intimate and curated had become the subject of criticism, viral complaints, and social media mockery. Headlines emphasized returns, backlash, and disappointment, creating a narrative that the brand was failing despite, or perhaps because of, its celebrity association. One striking feature of the media coverage was the focus on Meghan herself. Unlike traditional brands, where product issues are often separated from the founder, As Ever's identity was inseparable from its creator. Every headline implicitly or explicitly linked the returns and criticism to Meghan Markle personally. Was she out of touch with consumer expectations? Did she misjudge demand? Could her taste and vision translate into scalable products? These questions, while framed as business analysis, carried personal weight, scrutinizing her judgment, decisions, and public persona. Television news segments joined the conversation. Morning shows, lifestyle programs, and entertainment news all devoted airtime to discussing the As Ever returns. Analysts debated the brand's pricing, product quality, and marketing strategy. Social media clips showing dissatisfied customers were often played alongside commentary from influencers or experts questioning the brand's positioning. The coverage was relentless, constant, and designed for maximum engagement. For viewers, the story was entertaining. For Meghan, it was an inescapable spotlight. Print media was equally unforgiving. Articles in magazines dissected every element of the brand: packaging design, ingredient sourcing, price points, and even the Netflix tie-in. Some pieces highlighted the cultural contradictions at play, how a celebrity brand marketed as intimate could struggle under the weight of global expectation. Others framed the returns as symptomatic of a larger trend in celebrity commerce, using As Ever as a case study in the dangers of branding tied to a single personality. And while much of the media coverage focused on criticism, there were also subtle layers of intrigue and sensationalism. Some outlets speculated about Meghan's personal reaction, citing anonymous sources describing her shock and frustration. Others suggested internal discord within the As Ever team, implying that disagreements over strategy and quality control might have contributed to the crisis. The narrative grew more dramatic with each passing day, blurring the lines between fact, speculation, and storytelling. Part of the challenge was timing. Early media coverage had highlighted positive aspects of the brand: launch excitement, influencer partnerships, and initial fan engagement. But once returns and social media complaints reached a critical mass, the narrative shifted rapidly. Positive stories were quickly overshadowed, and the public perception of as ever began to skew heavily toward controversy. In the digital age, news cycles move fast, and the first narrative to dominate is often the one that sticks. For Meghan and her team, managing media coverage became a top priority. Public relations strategies were revised on a daily basis. Press statements were drafted, social media responses crafted, and media appearances considered to address questions proactively. Yet, despite these efforts, the coverage continued to escalate. Reporters dug into every detail, seeking angles that could make the story more compelling. The returns weren't just a logistical challenge. They were fodder for storytelling, drama, and public fascination. The emotional impact on Meghan intensified with every headline. Sources describe her closely monitoring coverage, reading articles, and discussing media strategies with her team. The personal stakes were enormous. This was not just a brand issue. It was a reflection of her reputation, her judgment, and her public identity. The intensity of coverage created pressure that few non-celebrity brands ever experience. Every decision, every response, every action was magnified, leaving little room for error. Some outlets also began questioning the long-term viability of as ever. Analysts speculated whether the brand could survive the backlash, pointing to potential challenges with production scaling, consumer trust, and market positioning. The returns were no longer just isolated incidents. They were framed as potential threats to the brand's future. For Meghan, what had started as a personal and creative project was now being publicly dissected as a commercial experiment under fire. And then came the more sensational stories. Headlines questioned whether the brand's failures reflected deeper miscalculations. Was the product pricing too high for mass-market consumers? Did the tie-in with Netflix create unrealistic expectations? Could celebrity influence alone sustain a lifestyle brand? Even speculation about internal tensions within the As Ever team became part of the media narrative, with anonymous sources cited to add drama and credibility. Each news story amplified public attention and fueled social media debates, creating a feedback loop of scrutiny and speculation. The international media didn't hold back either. British tabloids, American entertainment outlets, and global lifestyle publications all covered the story, each adding its own spin. Some focused on the celebrity angle, framing the returns as a reflection of Meghan's personal misstep. Others highlighted the consumer perspective, analyzing why customers were returning products in large numbers. Across continents, the conversation was the same. As Ever, once celebrated, was now facing unprecedented public scrutiny. Amid all this, Meghan reportedly felt the weight of both personal and professional pressure. Staffers described her as intensely involved in managing the situation, reviewing every piece of coverage and considering the implications of each story. Emotional highs and lows were common. Moments of frustration, disbelief, determination, and reflection all intertwined as she navigated the rapidly evolving narrative. For a founder whose name is literally on the brand, media coverage is not abstract. It's personal, immediate, and unrelenting. Yet, the coverage wasn't entirely negative. Some journalists emphasized the brand's ambition, highlighting Meghan's vision and creative investment. They explored the challenges of scaling a celebrity-driven lifestyle brand, noting that early setbacks are common in entrepreneurial ventures. These stories provided nuance, but they were often overshadowed by the more sensational headlines emphasizing returns, complaints, and public backlash. In the battle for perception, drama usually wins. As the media storm intensified, the stage was set for a new chapter in the As Ever saga. What had begun as operational and social media challenges now became a full-blown cultural conversation. Headlines, social media posts, and viral videos converged to create a narrative larger than the brand itself. And for Meghan, the stakes were higher than ever. Her personal reputation, her creative vision, and her ability to navigate public perception were all on the line. When a brand faces a crisis, the real story is often in the customer's hands. For Meghan Markle's as ever, the front lines were flooded with voices, emails, social media posts, review sites, and viral videos, all offering first-hand accounts of disappointment, frustration, and, in some cases, reluctant admiration. Behind each return was a story, and these narratives reveal just how complicated the as ever saga had become. It started with small complaints. A customer in New York tweeted that her jar of strawberry preserves had leaked during shipping. Another in Los Angeles posted a TikTok showing her tea bag floating awkwardly in hot water, claiming it didn't taste like the show. Each story seemed minor, isolated, almost forgivable. But as the number of complaints grew, patterns began to emerge. Issues with consistency, packaging, and taste. Soon, social media was filled with first-person accounts, each adding fuel to a growing fire. Many customers expressed emotional frustration. One woman described ordering a full set of as ever products for her mother's birthday, only to have multiple items arrive damaged. "I felt embarrassed and disappointed," she wrote online. It wasn't just about the products. It felt like the excitement I had built up watching the show was completely wasted. Stories like these humanized the crisis, showing that this wasn't just a logistical problem. It was a deeply personal experience for consumers who had emotionally invested in the brand. Some reactions were even more dramatic. A TikTok creator documented her experience opening a box of as ever items, narrating her growing disappointment as she discovered misprinted labels, uneven jars, and tea bags that didn't match the advertised flavor. By the end of the video, she was visibly frustrated, declaring, "I wanted a royal experience, not a disaster in a box." Videos like this went viral quickly, garnering millions of views and sparking comment threads that ranged from empathetic support to harsh criticism. Others focused on the disconnect between expectation and reality. Many fans had anticipated that as ever products would mirror the intimate, artisanal feel portrayed on Meghan's Netflix series. Some felt let down when the reality didn't match that vision. The packaging looked beautiful on screen, but the jam just tasted ordinary, one reviewer wrote. "I expected a personal touch, and instead it felt like mass-produced products with a famous name slapped on them." These narratives underscored a fundamental challenge. Celebrity brands carry an inherent promise of authenticity, and when the reality falls short, disappointment is magnified. Then there were customers who returned products not because of quality issues, but because of emotional reactions. A few expressed feeling betrayed that a product tied so closely to Meghan Markle's personal brand did not live up to their expectations. Social media posts described the act of returning items as almost symbolic, an expression of dissatisfaction not just with a product, but with a perceived gap between image and reality. "I felt like I was rejecting the fantasy," one commenter wrote. "It wasn't the jam I wanted, it was the idea of it, and that idea let me down." Amid the backlash, there were still stories of admiration and loyalty. Some customers defended the brand publicly, sharing positive experiences with taste, packaging, and overall quality. A small but vocal group posted reviews celebrating the authenticity of the products, claiming they captured the charm seen on screen. Yet their voices were often overshadowed by the flood of negative accounts, and social media narratives tended to prioritize drama over balance. Retailers also began noticing unusual trends. Store employees reported receiving returned products at unprecedented rates, often accompanied by notes explaining dissatisfaction or disappointment. Some customers even included screenshots of viral posts to illustrate why they were returning items, demonstrating how online discussions were influencing in-store behavior. The ripple effect of social media complaints had reached the physical marketplace, blurring the line between digital perception and real-world action. The variety of customer reactions was striking. Some were meticulous, providing detailed feedback about taste, texture, or presentation. Others were emotional, expressing disappointment rooted in personal expectations and investment in the brand. And then there were those who used the situation as entertainment, posting humorous videos or memes about their experiences. All of these reactions combined to create a complex, multi-layered picture of the crisis. one that was as much about perception and emotion as it was about product quality. It's also important to note the international dimension. While much of the early media coverage focused on US and UK consumers, reports of returns and complaints emerged worldwide. Customers in Canada, Australia, and Europe shared similar frustrations and emotional reactions. Social media made these stories globally visible, creating the sense that as Ever's challenges were universal rather than localized. The international scale added pressure on the brand to respond in ways that could satisfy diverse markets and expectations. Customer service teams faced intense pressure. Staffers were inundated with emails and calls, many detailing minor issues, but others documenting larger problems. Teams had to process returns, investigate complaints, and respond to frustrated consumers, all while the public narrative continued to grow on social media. The sheer volume of stories made it difficult to prioritize responses, and the emotional content of many messages heightened the stakes. Each interaction was potentially viral, meaning mistakes could have public consequences. Interestingly, some of the most impactful stories came from viral videos. Creators on TikTok and Instagram Live showcased unboxing experiences, taste tests, and even return processes. These videos were highly shareable, visually compelling, and emotionally charged, making them more influential than written reviews. As Ever had inadvertently created content for critics to amplify, giving a real-time window into consumer experiences that both informed and inflamed public perception. The emotional highs and lows of customers mirrored those of Meghan and her team. Fans who had eagerly anticipated the products experienced disappointment, frustration, or even embarrassment. Critics found validation in the returns, celebrating the exposure of flaws. The combination of these reactions created a feedback loop that intensified media coverage, social media debate, and internal stress within the brand. The front lines were no longer just about product logistics. They were about managing perception, emotion, and cultural expectations. Some stories went further, suggesting deeper dissatisfaction with the brand's approach. Customers expressed confusion about messaging, marketing, and even ingredient claims. Were these artisanal products meant to evoke luxury, or were they everyday items elevated by celebrity branding? Discrepancies between marketing and reality fueled skepticism and frustration, making the returns not just a matter of taste, but a reflection of larger questions about authenticity and expectation management. Despite the negative reactions, it's crucial to recognize that customer engagement was at unprecedented levels. Every complaint, every review, and every social media post contributed to a broader conversation about as Ever, creating visibility that, in another context, might have been beneficial. Yet the emotional intensity and negativity dominated, shaping public perception in ways that challenged the brand's positioning and narrative. As the stories from the front lines multiplied, it became clear that the returns were only the beginning. Customers' emotional investments, online narratives, and viral content were coalescing into a cultural moment, one that placed as Ever under scrutiny far beyond typical business metrics.